is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Interface.fm, design podcast brought to you by PeopleWho.Design. Today we have someone special for you guys, someone who's worked with companies like Microsoft, Book My Show, and is currently working as a UX catalyst with Swiggy. We have Miss Kanika Tibrewala with us, who is here to share her life story and her experience as a designer.
If you like this podcast, do like and subscribe to the channel. So, here we go.
How's the quarantine treating you?
Good, yeah. Actually, I'm not finding it too hard because I'm at home. But yeah, work's pretty busy and I'm trying to bake a lot. I just baked a chocolate cake, if that's interesting to anyone.
If I ask you, what's your story?
So I went to design school in New York. I'll backtrack a little bit. I was always a very creative kid. So I used to paint, draw, sculpt. I was really into fine arts. But early on, I knew that I didn't want to continue to do fine arts. I wanted something a little more employable. So I went to New York to study advertising. And there very quickly I realized, while making print ads and TV commercials, I realized that it is not something I'm actually very good at and neither do I enjoy it. But fortunately, the design department was the same as ad. So you kind of had to do both. So I explored graphic design, like the basics from typography, color, contrast, hierarchy, everything visual related to graphic. We built out brand identities, posters, book covers. And through that, I kind of explored different kinds of design in terms of motion graphics, and interaction design was one thing that I stumbled upon. And as soon as I took a class, I had some really good teachers who were teaching the foundation. So I think that had a lot to do with how I got into the field. The teachers that I had used to work at Google and used to work for Nike. So these kind of companies, I was already using their product. So it became very easy to understand the kind of work they were doing, and they were amazing at teaching. So that's how I got into the field, and I love how iterative and user-focused interaction design was, especially graphic and advertising, which was still very single dimension in comparison to interaction design, right? With UI UX, you were constantly speaking to the user and it was very iterative. And I think that's what got me interested in the field. And I didn't realize this at that point, but my parents used to run a software company and I always ran away from it, as every kid does from what their parents do, I think at some point. But because I started to understand the kind of work that they did, they used to build websites and tech solutions for different brands and companies. Our conversations got very deep about it. So I was in college, I was building digital campaigns as projects, building digital campaigns for brands and coming up with my own product solutions. And I was talking to them about real world scenarios. And then I had these teachers who were working at companies that seemed like they were doing a lot of good work. So a combination of that kind of got me interested and kind of cemented my passion in interaction design. And I'm glad I found it, because really advertising wasn't meant for me. And graphic, I liked it, but it didn't feel as exciting or as engaging as interaction design was. That's how I started in college. And there were two things that happened in college. One was that I wanted to work companies that had a very strong vision, because I told you my teachers used to work at Nike and Google, and they had a very strong vision for where they were going with their solutions. And two, I realized because I had within the realms of design and ad, I'd had a lot of various experiences, and I wanted to kind of have practical experience in how I chose what I wanted my next step to be. So I wanted to have as many varied kind of experiences as possible. So I worked in New York for a year and I worked on Nike products like Nike.com, and I worked on the golf app and the running app and something called Nike ID. And Nike has a very strong brand language, right? It's got a great typography. It's got a very set color palette. It's got a great vibe in terms of what it's trying to communicate. Very expressive. When I came back to India,
what year was this?
2015 and half of 2016. So I was a visual designer. While I was working here, I threw myself into a project. I worked at designing their internal portfolio site, where it was just me and two other designers, and we kind of decided how to go about building this product that we wanted. So that kind of got me interested in UX. So when I came back to India, I wanted to work at a product company. I didn't want to do agencies anymore, because again, I wanted to focus both on UI and UX. So I went to Book My Show, where it was a lot of fun, right? It was a fairly new team. Book My Show, this was 2016, so they were going through a complete rebrand. So I joined when they were right in the middle of getting that revamp developed, which meant that whatever came after was highly exploratory. I was working with the Indian market again, which in itself is very diverse, especially where entertainment is concerned. and you're day in and day out thinking about entertainment and movies, right? So it was a lot of fun. We did a lot of diverse kind of projects for different parts of the country. You kind of dabbled with different problem statements, different problem spaces, different demographics of people that you were designing for. So that was a lot of fun. And through this time, I was also freelancing a lot, but I was doing brand identities because one, it's very lucrative. And two, it kept my mind ticking with everything creative, right? Like if my work is going to demand product, I wanted to do something like wild and creative on the side. So I was doing branding. And then Microsoft happened, and it seemed like a great, Microsoft felt like a really fun thing to do because it was entirely different. It was a large corporation. It was enterprise for one. Book My Show was highly consumer driven. So was Nike. And I would be working with people from across the world, right? I used to work on Microsoft Teams, which was scattered across 3 countries. So we were working with people, researchers, PMs, designers from different countries. And that was a lot of fun because you were kind of working with set processes, but you were kind of creating your solutions independently and then throwing it up to the rest of the, right? So that was Microsoft, where I learned a lot about research and how product vision drives the kind of solutions that you need to come up with as a designer. And you're really just a small cog in the entire ecosystem. But again, like we had our own features that we were working on. And then after that, Swiggy happened. And I haven't been at Swiggy very long. I've been there for 5-6 months. And completely different space, right? Like, again, I'm back to consumer in a certain sense, but the team that I work on is working on new initiatives. So we run 0 to 1 experiments, where Microsoft is all about scale. Swiggy is all about running small scale experiments. So again, yes, we're thinking about the future, but we're also just working with a very small set of users and working with multiple different ideas. It's not like I'm working only on one feature, which is like Teams or like even the Swiggy app, right? We're doing multiple different things, which we can get into. But Swiggy is a completely different ballgame where I get to do more than just design.
You work as a UX catalyst in Swiggy. So can you please elaborate for the audience? What does it mean?
At Swiggy, I'm in a team called Swiggy Labs. I am part of the user experience as centers of excellence, as we call them. So Labs is a very cross-functional team. I'll have to tell you a little bit about the team for you to understand what a user experience catalyst does. So Labs is a very cross-functional team where it's comprised of people in business and strategy and research and insights. There's data analytics, engineering and product, and then design, right? And of course, I work with in design. User experience catalyst. Catalyst is a term that we use in Labs. The role of a UX catalyst is basically to own what user experience can bring to the different project that we run in Labs, right? Like every kind of function is going to have their own agenda that they bring to a certain problem space or a solution space, right? Like the business side is going to bring the business goals, the profit and loss metrics that they need to reach. They need to look at competition. They need to, in terms of money and in terms of business. You'll have the product and engineering looking at the text, and you'll have research and insights looking at the larger ecosystem. So design needs to take care of what the user's perspective is and bring in really the human behavioral aspect into the team. And it is UX Catalyst's job to basically, or anyone in user experience, it's a very open team. So the job of a UX person in this team is to create user journeys, outline user flows, understand what the behavioral patterns as well as the user journeys are for the audience that we are trying to target for any solution. And then of course create the actual product and have an output where they can create something that a user that we experiment with can interact with and help us understand if something is viable or not. So it's about bringing in, like creating the products, of course, but also just bringing in the user aspect of and the experiential aspect of a given target audience would go through in problem space.
How is it different from a design team?
So Swiggy basically stands at the intersection of a consumer product, which is what you and me would use to order food. Restaurants, so restaurant partners have a product, and then the delivery executives have a product, right? And there's a core product and design team, which includes researchers, illustrators, and of course product designers who will work on these 3 different products that Swiggy has. So they handle everything to do with that. Labs is entirely different. So Labs focuses on new initiatives. So anything that would drive growth for Swiggy in the future. It has nothing to do with incremental business improvements today. It is basically to drive exponential growth in the future. So we're a self-sustaining team where we do our own thing, which has nothing to do with the Swiggy brand in a certain sense, in terms of product, not in terms of course, only in terms of the product. We actually don't dabble too much with the actual core product, because what we are doing is we are just coming up with different solutions that we could experiment with, right? Like we don't know whether we're working with a lot of ambiguity. We're working with a lot of confidentiality, so we don't want to release it as something that's falling within the Swiggy. It's not coming from the house of Swiggy yet in a product perspective, right? We may not collaborate with the product team unless there is something that we need to do, but we are self-sustaining in ourselves, and that's why it's like think of labs as like a bunch of different startups within the guardrails of Swiggy's vision. So we run independently of Swiggy, but of course working within the guardrails of what Swiggy's vision is. And then once we come up with solutions that we feel would work well for future businesses, it goes to and not just the product team, it'll go to your marketing team and your product team as well as your business teams.
Okay. So since we're talking about your designation as a UX catalyst, now there's one thing that always, intrigues me is that there are a lot of designations around the design team, be it a product designer, interaction designer, service designer. So how much does the designation matter, and how exactly are they different from each other?
So I think this is a very big discussion within the industry, especially when you're moving from one job to the other. You kind of want to understand what different designation or titles to your role. I'll start initially with my experience and then I'll go to the larger difference. So I started off as a visual designer in an agency, and then I moved on to working as a product designer. So as a visual designer in an agency, in an agency specifically, there's a big difference between your UX and your UI. Your UX teams works all the way up till the wireframes, and then they give it to your visual designer to create the UI for it, right? So visual designers then focus on hierarchy, typography, brand identity, bringing the branding into your product. As you go into product companies, I believe that a lot of these titles are interchangeable depending on what a company uses, right? So at Book My Show, for instance, I was hired as an interaction designer and then I got promoted to a product designer. However, no part of my job changed with this promotion. I was still responsible for building our entire solutions. I was still collaborating with designers researchers as well as UX designers who were basically at the intersection of UX and research, and then we were the intersection of UX and UI. So, and because the team was so open, we do a lot of everything, right? And as soon as I moved to Microsoft, where I moved from technically a product designer to a UX designer at Microsoft, it's not like I didn't have to think about UI at all. Of course I had to. I had to work with the team's visual language and design systems that were already created. It's just that my job was to also think about user journeys, about user flows, about architecture of a product, and also the experience of navigating through a solution or a feature. So it's not like that changed because my title changed. And now when I'm part of Labs, I'm hired as a user experience designer, but my job and role is not changing because of the title. It's changing because of the culture of the team. There's a lot of your company culture, the way that your team is structured, and the kind of skills that you bring on really dictate the kind of tasks or jobs you'll do within a company. And you got to play to your strengths, right? Like, it's not like a product designer. You can be like, okay, that means I'm going to only think of product and not care about visuals. But if you can, then why not? And if you can't, then you go to companies that align with that. But this is a discussion I actually had with one of my mentors. It's always good, as I said, to you want to play to what your goals are and what you feel like you're good at. So he had this framework that he told me about. It was like a T diagram. So your vertical of the T is basically what you go in depth with, like what is your primary skill. So for me, it would possibly be user experience, right? And the top of your T is basically you can add anything to it. So you can decide you want to be a user experience designer who has motion graphics on one side and research on the other, and then you want to kind of dabble in the space between UX and motion graphics, or UX and research. Or you can be like, okay, I want to dabble between it. My T is basically business and research. So you kind of dabble between research and business, and then your depth is user experience. So it's the kind of intersection that you create for yourself that will make you have a unique set of skill sets, and then that is what you'll bring to a company. Titles in my head are interchangeable. It helps to know what kind of titles in what company adhere to which level that you're trying to go to, because when you shift companies from one to the other, you want to know which position to join at. But it will generally be within a company. Like, different companies deal with a hierarchy within a team very differently. So it's more important to understand that and understand what the role of each step is, more than sticking to the name of a title, really.
Yeah, okay. I have a nice and a trick question for you. That is that if you had to give up UX or UI, which one would you choose?
Between the two?
Yeah, you can only do one.
Oh.
Nay.
I honestly think a UI designer needs to understand UX, to be very honest. But for the sake of your question, I think I'd give up UI. Because with UX, you can really go deep into product thinking, and it's probably my favorite part of the process, like brainstorming on the back-end architecture and understanding tech constraints, taking into account data from research and also from past features that have been used and we have data on it, and then breaking that down to create the problem statement and building a feature out. That is probably my favorite parts, and that basically happens, for the sake of differentiation, it happens more with UX design.
UX is a bigger circle and UI is a very small part of UX. So UX is not just that you are planning. How you are executing, how user is feeling after using your app is very essential. Like if I take an example of a restaurant, you get great food there, but if the waiter is not talking to you properly, I won't be able to go there.
I completely agree. It extends much, much beyond. Like you open the app, even when you're thinking about food, your experience starts from when you think about ordering food. And then, of course, order your food, you place the order, the feedback mechanisms there, how they keep you engaged through the process. And then when you get the delivery, the way the customer service is behaving. Similarly, for any other product, right? Your experience isn't a digital experience only. And it's one of the things that honestly I've been exposed to a lot more, or have the opportunity to explore a lot more in labs, because when we're exploring solutions, we are exploring it as an entire business, right? So we aren't looking at only, it may not even be a digital product. It may be something that it may be like a YouTube channel, or it may be like, I don't know, just throwing away words now, but it can be anything. That's why I said as a UX person and not just a designer. As someone who's advocate for user experience in general, that's how I look at my job at labs. You need to look at the journey of a user that you're trying to reach and understand what it is that would bring the best experience for them, which means there are touch points not only in product, but also in marketing and also in operations and also in the way that they would probably talk about your feature, right? Like that, which is your brand image in a certain sense. So what is the problem you're solving for them, and what is the best way to do it? And you kind of consider every aspect of doing that. And that whole thing constitutes as experience.
I think you touched a very good point. Like, we are the advocate or the lawyers for the user. Like, we are the voice of a user.
And like, what a privilege, right? Like, as I said, like, it's a compliment to our job is to the voice of the user, empathize with them, and just as everyone is focusing on a different part of the actual business, you are focusing on the user's part. So you're kind of advocating for people who aren't present in the room at that point. I actually read a really good tweet about this just today. It said that user experience as a term is limiting because it makes a user feel like wish I can find the tweet again, because it's not mine at all, and this is a disclaimer that should be put out. Like, something I read, which was amazing, that user experience makes the user feel like they are being subjected to an experience that we are providing, but they are a very active part of the experience. They are the ones who are creating the experience, really. So it's more like user enablement, which was amazing to read, because it is true. Like, everything that we do, it's because it's a response to the way they behave. Even though we are going with the solution that we are proposing, it needs to align with the way that they behave, right? So that was a great tweet I read today.
Okay. So, Kanika, you just said that a designer needs to wear a lot of hats. So, talking about you, what kind of hats do you wear at Swiggy Labs? What all do you have to do?
So, I don't think a designer always needs to wear many hats. It's good if you do. And that's a personal thing. I would love to do many things. But just to clarify, the larger the company you go in, like at Microsoft, my role was very specialized. I was not doing research. I was not technically doing or building visual systems. I was only creating product experiences, right? I was only hashing out features. As soon as you go to smaller companies, you kind of have to wear many hats. Labs is a unique situation where, as I said, it's like startups within Swiggy in a certain sense. So I need to wear many hats in the sense that even though I'm hired as a user experience designer, I have to be the advocate for the user as a whole, which means that sometimes I have to work on marketing collaterals to best communicate a solution. Sometimes I have to be the researcher and run different kinds of studies in whatever way. Like, there's so many ways to research, like user interviews, surveys, release product experiments, A/B testing and stuff like that. So we have to sometimes do that. Sometimes I'm working with many different teams to get this done, right? Sometimes I'm working very closely directly with engineering to kind of build out experiments, as I said. So under the guardrails of speaking for the user and under the guardrails of creating the experience, you have to do everything it takes to to run a successful solution or to build a successful solution. So it could be many things, and then of course I also create product solutions as well. That's of course something that we do, but we also have to be researchers at times, build collaterals, speak to a lot of different, speak to business folks to understand or to brainstorm on the different paths we can take to hash out a solution and the different areas or the different target audiences can target with a certain problem that we're trying to solve, right? So it's a very steep learning curve, but you're kind of influenced. It's really significant in my head because through the lens of user experience, you're kind of influencing the direction that a certain solution can take. So it's not just the direction of the product that you're building. Building a product is just a means of navigating through multiple solutions, right? So those are the.
So how do you guys collaborate with each other to take better design decisions?
So at different teams, it works differently, but what is unanimously true across the board is that you rightly said it's collaboration, right? It's not like you're competing with someone. So the best way I know is to, first of all, anchor the entire discussion to a problem space, to a problem statement so that we know everyone is solving the same kind of problem. Once you have that, we have a really powerful designers is that we can visually show what we're thinking. Like you won't see that in, say, a product manager can do PM mocks, for instance, but it's great to do that, which we kind of build our solutions on at times, but they probably just have an idea, they bring in data and you can actually bring it to life, right? Business folk again have an idea and they can speak about it, but then you are the ones who can visualize it for them. So I think we have the advantage of our hard skills to bring something to life. So when you show that, when you brainstorm or when you base something on a hard visual prototype maybe, or wireframes or whatever it is, you can build a stronger discussion point, right? You can anchor your discussion to something. So I think that is one way to collaborate with people. Two is it's about understanding that different stakeholders who are building out a product have different kinds of data, right? Like this is something that I believe very strongly in, is to collaborate with the engineers really early on. So they are bringing in the tech constraints at a very early stage. So you're not wasting time later on after you build a very idealistic solution and then you realize it. So you work with them to understand tech constraints first. Like are they building over certain code that you need to be aware of? Are there any edge cases that you as a designer are missing out, but they do need to code for, right? So you kind of work with them early on. PMs are going to have a congruent idea of what you're building and why you're building it, right? So they'll be the center point of business tech, and so you kind of work with them for, of course, the data, for the business vision that you are building towards, and you work with them, right? And I love working very closely with PMs because I think it's a very complementary relationship where you kind of you're working towards solving the same problems, right? So you got to understand and research, of course, because you have to base, it makes a designer's job so easy when you're kind of basing it on the voice of the user in general. You have all this qual and quant data that you can base a solution on. So you're understanding that each stakeholder that comes to the table to brainstorm is bringing on a different perspective. So it's about finding a middle ground, and of course, it's also understanding that there are, I wouldn't say compromises, but certain adjustments that your solution will have to make way for, say, a better business outcome. Like there's no point to having a great design solution if it's not going to make the money in the future, similarly, there's no point to having, let me give an example, there's no point to having a business idea where the experience isn't good for the user. You shouldn't even compromise on that. So everyone comes to the table to solve one major problem, and it's respecting that the different perspectives are all solving for one. If I have to summarize it, one is, of course, bring in your solution to in a visual format. It's really worked for me, especially during disagreements, because either you'll realize that there's a better solution out there, or they'll see your version through a visual prototype maybe. And two is to respect all perspectives and then brainstorm, knowing that you're all solving for the same problem.
So you have worked with many organizations in the past, and maybe you have faced some problems, maybe some challenges. So what solution did you bring in the organization so that they can function better?
So I think first, I think it's important to know that I adapt to a system that I'm put into. Of course, within that system, I work to be as efficient as I can be and work with my own process, which is why coming into Swiggy, I completely had to change the way that I worked. But it's something that I'm still working towards, but it's not completely blasphemous for me to be doing it. There are a few things that I learned over the last 3 or 4 years that I think is really useful when you're working in a product team. So one is at Microsoft, one is documenting the decisions you're taking, but the ideal decision against what actually is being implemented. Because sometimes, especially at Microsoft, it happened a few times where there is and it happens in any company, right? You have the ideal solution and then you got to tweak it based on either tech constraints or timeline constraints, or to match some marketing timeline or deadline where you need to adjust your actual features. So it's always, it's an iterative process. So I used to do this thing where when I document my work, I wrote why the solution is the way it is and what the ideal solution should be. And what were the parameters or factors that were the reasons why I had to change the solution. I used to write that down. So today, and these decks, it was in the form of a deck and they were very self-sustaining. So if someone had to read it, they didn't need me to explain what had actually happened. Like I used to narrate basically the whole story of how I went from product to execution to code. So that's one thing that I learned, and it's really helped me good because one, you have good documentation for your reasoning and your decisions that you've taken. And also two, for anyone, like I've left Microsoft today, right? But if anyone opens up my work now, they'll probably know the decisions that went behind it, what constraints there were at that point, which may not be there today, and therefore they can better the solution. So that's one thing I did. And two, I learned very early on at my show that getting in buy-ins from whoever is involved in a project is very important to streamline and have a good experience of shipping a product. It's very important to work in a team, get buy-ins, get not only buy-ins, but also suggestions and feedback from the rest of your team so that you know you're building out the best solution. And this is something we used to do at Microsoft as well, where we used to critique each other's designs, each other's work, get buy-ins as well. So those were a few things that I felt like I learned over time. I knew that happened in teams, but I didn't realize how important and how valuable it could be overall. But when it comes to defining a system, I kind of adapt to a team's culture in a certain sense. So I didn't personally have too many issues adapting.
So on that note, I want to ask you, like, how do you react to criticism, and how do you think an ideal designer should react to criticism?
Sure. So I personally, when I was in college, one of the first things I categorically remember being told in one of our classes was to never be personally attached to any work that you do. It's hard to do because it's your work, right? It's a little bit like your baby, but to not be personally attached for few reasons, right? One is, of course, you want to be detached enough to take the best decision for the product and it's not for the product, right? Two, so very early on, I was taught not to get attached, and I'm honestly not a very attached person at design. I'm passionate about what I do, but for me, the process of doing it is what matters. The outcome, not so much. Where it comes to criticism, again, like college trained me for this really well because we used to have critiques in almost every class, and our teachers were very rightly so ruthless with their criticism, right? Like they wanted to make us better designers and also employees. So they used to be really harsh with their critique. And me to not take it personally. I think that's one of the biggest things, to not any critique towards your work is a critique to the work and the solution and not to you. So that's number one. Number two is always focus, I think, on the problem that you're solving. So, and be open-minded, right? So someone is telling you that there is a better way to do this or is asking you a question. It is because they are trying to understand the problem space better themselves. And then they probably have a different way to think about it, which can open your mind up, which is where the open-mindedness helps. So that's number two. Number three is that whoever's critiquing your problem is possibly part of creating the solution as well, right? They're different stakeholders and they are in it for the same reasons that you are, to create something really good for the end user, right? So you got to create a sense of trust with your colleagues who help you come up with a better solution. So when they give you a criticism or a critique, it's not even criticism, it's critique towards something that you've designed or built. It is for the betterment of the actual outcome. This also but relates back to how you should possibly give criticism. It should be, and this is something that we follow even in our team at Swiggy, is to be incredibly candid and straightforward, not beat around the bush. Just give your critique, but give it in a way that is speaking primarily about the solution and not about a person, right? So yeah, giving criticism is how you give it is as important as how you receive it.
Now that we've talked about criticism, I want to talk about motivation. Like what motivates you, what pushes you?
Yeah. So for me, as I said, I've always wanted to work at companies and work with teams who are very mission or vision driven, because I feel like I'm the best when, and this is a personal thing, right? Different things drive different people. So what drives me is when I know that an entire team is, or a company is dedicated to a single mission, which is what Swiggy, Microsoft, even Book My Show had, and Nike, of course, has. So that's number one. So when I'm working in a team that is so driven by its own mission, and I said I adapt to that, it's very easy for me to get motivated to that. Two, I want to work with people who are, one, better than me, because I feel like I'm like a sponge. I absorb from my surroundings a lot. So working with people who are smarter than me, who are better than me, and who have skills that are more diverse or different than mine. Learn through their experiences as well. That is very important to me. So whenever I interview with companies and people, it's very often happened that I've been excited about the people who've interviewed me and their background and their stories, and therefore I've joined a company. Like it happened with Microsoft, it happened even with Swiggy, right? Like I spoke to my interviewers, whoever interviewed me, about their backgrounds, about what they do, what kind of work they aspire to do themselves. So when I see people like that, when I hear about their stories, I get excited to work with them. So two, I chase people, right? One is company vision, two is people. Three, I want to work on solutions that work in spaces that are doing work that is impacting a large number of people. So when I took up Microsoft, I was going to work at scale. And then I realized that working at scale is great, but I also want to explore the Indian ecosystem and do work that is significant to that. So I think if I have to summarize it, three things. I want to work at companies that are very vision or mission driven. Two, I want to work with people who are much better and smarter than me and who have a more diverse set of skills and talents and hard skills, soft skills, both. And three is to work on impact driven work.
So I want to come back to your second point when you said that you go in, like whoever's interviewing you, you talk to them. So what I want to know is, like, do you start talking to them during the interview? It's like you went in and then you start interviewing them.
Yeah.
I think it's a great tip for the interviews. When you have the interview, start interviewing the interviewer.
Wait a minute. Who are you?
Yeah, it's like...
But that's actually it's not a bad idea, because as much as they are interviewing you, and of course you can't hijack the interview, and it doesn't have to be that way, very honestly. So the way I do it is, first of all, I prep for an interview in the sense that you can ask your HR who's going to interview, right? And or like when you get an invite, a calendar invite, it's generally with the name of the person. So I be a little awkward-ish and I go onto LinkedIn and Twitter and see what they're up to, what the experience has been, what kind of work they've done, what kind of teams they worked in. I look at those things. So when I go into an interview, I'm prepared about who I'm speaking to, right? Like I know a little bit about them. And interviews, it is going to be 70% them asking you questions. But after a certain point, I think it can also be a conversation. It's not like an interview from their end and then an interview from your end. It's not like that. It can be a conversation, and it can be something that you can build onto. You can't just, I understand when you walk in an interview, you can't just suddenly start having a conversation. It is going to be pretty question answer initially.
It totally depends on the personalities, I think.
Yeah.
So you can drive it. I've taken interviews of people and I've given a lot of interviews. And I think one of the key points is if you're interviewing, is to have questions prepared that you want to ask. I think that's something that, don't try to wing it. If during the conversation or interview you come up with other questions, great, but always have questions prepared that you want to ask your interviewer. It could be about the company, the team, the kind of work you're going to do, but it could also be about what part, like you can ask them things like, what part of your job do you really enjoy? Or like, what is it that's driving you to stay in this job? Or like, what prompted you to take this job up? right? What is it that you would say, or like what do you feel like a person like me with my skill sets could bring to a team? And you'll start to understand the way that they think, the way that the company thinks, the way that they're trying to build a team up. You'll start to understand the nitty-gritties of this. So that kind of changes your perception of even the job. You're not kind of doing this for a selfish reason as well, because you want to see if you can fit into the team.
What do you recommend to the people who just entered the design industry? You went to a design school and you've worked with a lot of self-taught designers. And this is also a very big question in the industry, that whether you should join a design school or not, and how to go about things in the industry. So if you could give in your point of view on this.
I think you said it. Like I've worked with, of course, I've had a formal education in design, and it's just something I chose to do at the time. But I've worked with a lot of self-taught designers, and the more I work, the more I come across, and a lot of them, if I may say so, are much, much better than I am today. And that has to do with individual person. I honestly don't, and there's this big battle, as you said, in the industry, which one's better, self-taught versus not. Both have their difficulties, both have their challenges in any sense. I do think that the skills that you bring on as both are pretty complementary. Like I can give personal examples where I think being from a design, I had a very structured environment through which I learned design. And that is not a privilege, and that's a privilege which I don't think self-taught designers have in a certain sense. Yeah, there's so much content out there. Like today itself, I spoke to someone who called me up because she wanted to get into the industry, and I honestly fumbled to give her concrete advice of how she should start because I went to school for it. So I had to point her to designers who were self-taught so they could speak about their process. But the discipline that comes with being a self-taught designer is something that I think I wouldn't have because I had a structured environment. Similarly, I think self-taught designers are pretty agile in their processes. We come from design school, we come with pretty strong processes. And likewise, like our processes are so strong that if we work with self-taught designers, maybe they can learn something from us. So I look at it as it's not self-taught versus design school. I look at it as everyone's designers and everyone has their own way of learning. And I know we spoke about this earlier, Ashwin, and I think I completely actually respect the point that you made because college gave me a good head start and it ensured that I didn't have to go through the struggling of fumbling of how to become a designer. And I'm very happy and grateful for that jump start. But after a certain point, we all need to continue being self-taught designers, right? Like the industry, tech in general and design in general is changing so much that we can't rely only on colleges and institutions to teach us what we need to know or how we can be better designers. It is something that we need to proactively do. And that is where I feel like self-taught designers, I am trying to learn from them today because, as I said, they can create their own curriculum for themselves. They can create their own systems of learning, which I haven't had the experience of doing till I started to imbibe from them. So I personally think you don't have to go to design school to learn, but you do need to create or ground your learning in a certain system which you'll have to possibly create for yourself. And then you got to build on top of that. For me, what helps me, and I don't say this for design, I say it for any kind of skill that I want to learn how to do, or any kind of hard or soft skill that I want to garner, I kind of reach out to people who I feel are already doing that. And I see the kind of processes and the kind of patterns that they may have followed. And I also read a lot online on how to start. And I'm pretty basic about this. I'll go online and Google like how to start with data analytics. Or like I'll also speak to like people who I know are studying it, people who I know have started to move in that direction and see what kind of resources they're using, what kind of processes they're following to learn something new. So I feel it's starting from there. But yeah, I definitely do not look at it as one against the other. And I do not think one is better than the other. It's basically everyone's a designer and there's one designer who has certain skills and another designer who has overlapping skills but has some other strong points.
Sounds good.
True. So my last question for the day. What legacy you want to leave behind?
Bhari bharkam question, yaar.
You're not the first one to say this.
Yeah, like I understand the plight of everyone else who's had to answer this question. And like who have the answer to this, man? Like I don't know the legacy I'd like to leave behind, but I can tell you the kind of work I want to do. And it's one of the reasons why I took up Swiggy as a company. Right? So I wanted, once after Microsoft, I was reading a lot and I realized I wanted to work on building product that drive business growth. And it's something that I hadn't explored at all. Or even if I explored it a little bit in Book My Show, I didn't actually understand the impact of it or the extent of it because I was so young and maybe wasn't as experienced. So it requires me to understand, of course, business and understand the kind of problems and solutions that we can come up with to drive business growth, understand the metrics of what business is, how can product drive that, what are the metrics that product needs to be aware of or designers need to be aware of to gauge whether something is going to create the desired impact or not. I can say that I want to work on new initiatives and growth because I do think it's a very exciting space where you're kind of dictating what the coming years for the certain company would be, right? It's not designing for only today, it's designing for the future. And it's a very exciting space because you're kind of dabbling in multiple different areas of problem spaces and looking at such different target audiences, and you're kind of starting to define that, right? And it's an extremely privileged and powerful position to be in. And it's one of the reasons I took up Swiggy is because a cross-functional team like ours, I get constantly work with business strategists and product managers who are very aligned to or know how to build businesses in a certain sense, right? So they can possibly teach me, like I'm learning a lot from them. So I can tell you I want to work on new initiatives as of now, and it's why I took up the job. But I don't know what legacy I want to leave behind. And I say that because every job that you do in my head builds you for what you'll do next in a certain sense, right? Like it's like a building, it's like a ladder that you're climbing in a certain sense. So if I just always know, I have a vision for what I want to do next. After Book My Show, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be better at research. I wanted to work at a global scale. So that's why when Microsoft happened, I jumped on it. And then I wanted to work and understand the business aspects of and the business impact of design. So I took Swiggy. When it came to me, I took it because I thought it would teach me that. And then right now I'm learning a lot here. And then I'll use this kind of information and the kind of learnings I have in the company to see maybe what I want to do next. And I basically don't know how to think 10 years down the line for my career, but I can know the kind of vision that is dictating my next step. So I'll always be open to learning, seeing how today's learnings impact what I want to do next. So that's generally how I take decisions and see the next few years for me. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And it was so insightful and grateful to talk to you. And it was great talking to you, Kanika.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the great questions. I hope your listeners find something useful in it. And I'm very happy to have any additional conversations that anyone wants to have anytime. And it was a great conversation and looking forward to many other episodes.
Thank you so much, Kanika, for your time.
I hope you liked this episode. If you did, let us know which part you liked the most. If you want us to invite your favorite designers, let us know their names in the comment section below. We are also putting up our social media handles in the description. If you like this podcast, do like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one. Cheers.